The first lesson from Gita is communication need not be the way that we always imagine communication to be. Mattah parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya mayi sarvamidam proktam sutre maniganaiva. This is the set tone. And it concludes with Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su. Only a man who's married and whose wife is living is entitled to go near the fire, can perform fire-based rituals. When Rama was carrying a stick with some fire burning towards it, Hanuman knew that Rama was married from his attire. Hanuman knew that Rama's wife was living because the fire was blazing. The conversation is largely believed to be between Krishna and Arjuna. This is Bhagavad Gita. But the irony is, the first verse opens up with Dhritarashtra's question. The last verse ends with Sanjaya's answer. Yudhishthira and Bhishma speak Vishnu Sahasranama. Krishna and Arjuna speak Bhagavad Gita. Yaksha and Yudhishthira speak Yaksha Prashnam. Valmiki and Narada speak Ramayanam. Shuka Maharishi and Parikshit speak Bhagavatam. Maitreya and Parashara speak Vishnu Puranam. Two people speak, it's a conversation. You have the right to ask. 50 years later, when a couple of us may manage to survive, I don't know how many of them will be reading Harry Potter. But even then, people will be reading the Bhagavad Gita. Sarvopanishado gavaha dogdha gopalanandanaha partho vatsaha sudhir bhokta dugdham gitamritam mahat mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim Yat kripa tamaham vande paramananda madhavam. A very good evening to the members of the Rotary Club of Madras East. And thanks for the lavish introduction. He said that he was cutting short his speech by not saying anything which seems like cracking a joke. But the beauty is, one of the persons who spoke so well of me was Ramaswamy, and we are very close to Gopalapuram. So, what a combination that I can expect as a religious speaker. The topic that I have been ordained to speak is the learnings that we derive from the Gita. In this very revered, very ancient civilization, one of the two itihasas that we have bequeathed is Sri Mahabharatam. Bharatah Panchamo Vedaha Jamata Dashamo Grahaha is an ancient saying. If at all the status of the fifth Veda has to be assigned to a scripture, it has to be the Mahabharata, because we revere the four Vedas, Rig, Yajuh, Sama, Atharvanam. If at all there is a position for the fifth Veda that needs to be assigned, it needs to be given to the Mahabharata. Bharata Panchamo Vedaha. Like how, so we have made 4 plus 1, the plus 1 is given to the Mahabharata. Like how in the yesteryears, the parents to the bride would be extremely worried if they could get a groom for the girl, and they would do pradakshina around the Navagrahas in the temple, hoping they would get a very conducive and a very good son-in-law, to only realize after the marriage is over that the one who has arrived troubles more than the 9. So the son-in-law in those days was called the 10th Graha. Like how the Bharata is the fifth Veda. Bharata Panchamo Vedaha Jamata Dashamo Graha. Jamata is the son-in-law. So in the fifth Veda, the status that has been accorded to the Mahabharata, it is oft said that there are 5 priceless, resplendent gems that are studded together, that have been time and again been expounded and elucidated for the masses. One is a conversation that happened between Dhritarashtra and his wise brother. So in Vyakarana, when we use an adjective for one of the objects of the same category, Sajatiya Vastu, then it means that the adjective is not applicable for the other Vastu. We speak of two brothers, Dhritarashtra and Vidura. But I said Dhritarashtra had a wise brother, which means the wise is not applicable for Dhritarashtra. That is the grammatical rule. தமிழ்ல இதுதான் ரெண்டு பிள்ளை, ரெண்டாவது ரொம்ப சமத்து, முதல்ல அசடுன்னு அர்த்தம். So the conversation that happened between this king called Dhritarashtra and his wise brother called Vidura gave rise to the first gem called as Vidura Niti. The second was again a conversation between Sanat Sujata and Dhritarashtra, which is called Sanat Sujatiyam, the second gem. The third is interestingly a set of questions that is posed by a yaksha to Yudhishthira, and that is put forth to him, thrown as a volley of questions, saying that only if he answers all the questions right, will he be able to drink 100 ml of water. So to drink 100 ml of water, you need to answer 124 questions right. People will choose death. So Yudhishthira had the wisdom and the patience to answer all of them, and that is called Yaksha Prashnam. The fourth is, of course, a compendium of 1,000 names, which was answered to a set of 6 questions called Shat Prashni. Kimekam Daivatam Loke, Kimbapyekam Parayanam, Stuvantahkam Kamarchantaha, Prapnayur Manavaha Shubham, Kodharmas Sarvadharmanam, Bhavatah Paramomataha, Kim Japan Muchyate Jantur, Janma Samsara Bandhanat. To these set of 6 questions asked by Yudhishthira after the war had ended, while one of the overlived Dumbledores of those times called Bhishma was lying on the bed of arrows. That compendium is referred to as Vishnu Sahasranamam. And the 5th gem is, of course, a conversation that happened between Krishna and his cousin come son-in-law of the house, because Krishna and Arjuna were super related. Krishna's aunt's son was Arjuna, and Arjuna's uncle's son was Krishna, so they were related. And he was incidentally also the son-in-law because he was married to Krishna's sister called Bhadra. Since she was a well-behaved one, it was prefixed with the letter Su. Subhadra. So, this conversation that happened between these two people, which is one of the 5 gems, spotted in the 5th Veda, is the topic of the day called Gita. And what lessons we derive from it is what I have been asked to speak. Lessons could be plenty. And it depends on what and how you see the scripture. Portion number 1. It's a very simple learning. When probably a lot of us were students at school, or when we have seen children being nourished and nurtured right in front of our eyes, schools have a certain pattern, a tone and a tenor when they teach the Gita. Mattah parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya mayi sarvamidam proktam sutre manigana. This is the set tone. And it concludes with Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Sankhya Yogo Nama Dvitiyodhyayaha. This is the tone. But the beauty is, Aurobindo says, Gita is the song of the Lord. So Krishna did not recite, he sang. Is singing so much of a noteworthy thing? Absolutely yes, because he was singing on the battlefield. Imagine you'll have to deploy a medley of ragas on the battlefield. You go to Kargil and you use Hamsadhvani. So he was singing. He was absolutely cool. One of the slangs in the Gen Z is you slay it that way. He slayed it. With his tone, he sang. And the irony is there has been a lot of subsequent questions that have been asked of it. A person asks questions, the other one answers, and the questions go round and round. So there are a set of 700 verses which have been packed and housed in 18 chapters. So even to recite these shlokas will take an hour and 45 minutes. What were the others doing then? There are some improbable answers given which said that, oh, the time was stopped, everything froze, people were petrified, and suddenly the conversation happened. That is beyond logic. And second thing is to explain a verse in the Gita in the modern age, even word by word meaning and giving what is told in the lines and between the lines, takes roughly about 15 to 20 minutes to explain a verse. Imagine 700 into so many. So did Arjuna, how did he even ask? So let's assume that Arjuna was extremely intelligent. Let's assume that he had won over sleep, because technically religious lectures have a byproduct which is not so intended, which is sleep. So many people when they meet me, the best compliment that they give is, I hear you while at sleep and for sleep. So the only solace that I can derive is I'm a side effect less restful. So religious lectures put people to sleep. And Arjuna won. Why? Because he refers, Krishna gives a hint. He says, Gudakesha. Gudaka is sleep. So he says, Gudakesha, the one who has won over sleep. It doesn't mean he never slept. Sleep was under his control. He could choose when he could sleep. So he was absolutely awake. So when you're awake, that gives you a step advantage to pay attention. One, like how you all are. See, I've given some nice things about you. One. Second, Arjuna didn't have to seek clarifications like how we do. He didn't have to just say, I kind of had doubt in the second verse. Can you just explain again? He didn't have to do that. So he was awake. He was alert. He didn't have to ask for a repetition. And above all, it is said that the conversation was absolutely seamless, like it happened in a second. Maybe Vyasa, who compiled, took the efforts to expand that 1 minute conversation into 700 verses for our sake. So, communication, the first lesson from Gita is communication need not be the way that we always imagine communication to be. Communication is where when a message is conveyed from point A to B, it can happen any way. Simple as a body language. When Hanuman met Rama for the first time in Kishkindha, in the district of Bellary in Karnataka, he didn't have to ask, oh, hello sir, where are you coming from? Kannada gutta? Right? ಬಂದಿರೋದು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ, ನಮ್ಮೂರಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಕನ್ನಡ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ವೇ? ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಮಾಡಿರ್ಬೋದಲ್ವಾ? ಅವರು UP ಇಂದ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. So, and a very cliched question he could have asked, மாமி வரலையா? கேட்டிருக்கலாமோ? ஏன் நம்மளாலும் கேட்டு இருக்கிற வாழை விட்டுட்டு. Hanuman did not ask any of it. Why? Because from Rama's attire of kacham is a certain way that you drape your dhoti with. So the way you drape yourself at 5 knots is called pancha kacham, which is worn only by married men. So your dress, your attire will give way to the fact of your marital status. Second, only a man who's married and whose wife is living is entitled to go near the fire, can perform fire-based rituals. When Rama was carrying a stick with some fire burning towards it, Hanuman knew that Rama was married from his attire. Hanuman knew that Rama's wife was living because the fire was blazing. Third, the man could be married, yet his wife be dead, making him a widower. In that case, it is not possible to carry the fire, which means that Hanuman knew Rama's wife existed and she was living. But he knew from the melancholy that was smeared on the face of Rama that his wife was missing. That is why he is the melancholy. So I shouldn't ask a single question of her. So the body language communicates the status of a person. So communication need not always be oral. So Gita in itself is a communication that happened between A and B. And that communication was so seamless that these questions of how it happened on a battlefield with such a long time, with the audience waiting, with no patience in them, doesn't arise. First learning. Second, the conversation is largely believed to be between Krishna and Arjuna. This is Bhagavad Gita. But the irony is, the first verse opens up with Dhritarashtra's question. The last verse ends with Sanjaya's answer. So, the compendium of these verses that we revere as the Gita begins with Dhritarashtra's question and ends with Sanjaya's answer. Why? In the 1960s, my grandmother who got married then, 1950s, 60s. At that point in time, the blue jacket diamonds from the mines of South Africa it was a rage. Like how we are vibing to Dhurandar's tone now. And we were making reels with so, Allah. You see that everywhere. So, while this is the rage now, the blue jacket diamonds were, so it was quite pricey then. It's become absolutely worthless tinsel now. So, when the blue jacket diamonds used to be bought, it was a ritual to keep the bunch of diamonds at home and check the outcome of events at home. If it was very auspicious, then they would retain the diamonds and then make a beautiful stud out of it. If you were called for a Gita lecture, they would give it back. So, these diamonds were made into studs. And it was a norm to protect it so well. So, the blue jacket diamonds, the studs, would be kept into a small box. The box will be kept in a purse. The purse will be kept in a side locker. The side locker will have a main locker. And then there will be as many pictures of gods, believing that they will protect the locker. And then there used to be a very heavy iron door outside, whose single scratch will need at least 4 tetanuses with you. And there will be a door that will have a lock. The main door will have a collapsible gate outside. And then there will be another door. So the thief, if he had the intent to take away the studs, he had to literally come into Sapta Prakara Madhye, 7 fortresses to take the studs away. So when you have something that is as priceless, as nulli secundus as it seems, you place it very carefully in a box. So Krishna and Arjuna's conversation is so very priceless that Dhritarashtra's question was the opening of the box and Sanjaya's answer towards the end was the closing of the box, and the conversation was like the blue jacket diamonds that was kept. So the second learning, when Dhritarashtra asks, Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kim Akurvata Sanjaya He Sanjaya, who's my charioteer, come minister. So it was a norm that ministers were very educated in those days. So I'm not giving you an example of an oxymoron. So Sanjaya, he was very patient in listening and he asked Dhritarashtra, what do you wish to ask? Look at Dhritarashtra's audacity. He said, what are my sons and Pandu's sons doing? He was just not the father of the Dhartarashtra's, he was the administrator too. He didn't know how to partition between these two roles of being a father and a king. He did not know how to bring that demarcation. So he asks, rightfully there were two choices in front of him. He could have asked, what are my sons doing and what are my brother's sons doing? Which will make it a simple relationship that Pandu and Dhritarashtra were brothers. They produced, the one produced 5, the other one produced 100. So it was just about two brothers. He could have just simply asked, what are my sons doing and what are my brother's sons doing? The question is straightforward. Or he could have put himself into the shoes of an administrator and he could have asked, what are Pandu's sons doing and what are Dhritarashtra's sons doing? Is it possible to for a person to even put himself separately? He is Dhritarashtra, but he is asking what are Dhritarashtra's sons doing? Absolutely yes. I used to have great friends who used to speak Malayalam from Kerala and Pilani. And their mothers used to come to the station to leave us in the Tamil Nadu Express, which will hopefully take us a day later. We had two options. We had another train called GT. GT would take us, but we wouldn't know when. So while we were quite affirmed and very positive about our arrival time, we used to take the TN Express. So my friend's mother would leave and then she would say, Auntie is very angry. She would tell that to me. So Auntie is very angry. I said, which auntie? She said, me. So she literally placed herself, Auntie ke vada ko, auntie So he could have simply asked, what are Pandu's sons doing and what are Dhritarashtra's sons doing? Taking cue from Malayalam grammar. He asked none. He made a very, very, very bad, nasty combination of both. He said, what are my sons doing and what are Pandu's sons doing? Sanjaya knew at the very onset of this conversation itself where he went wrong. So mistakes are never made in the middle, says the commentator. It is made at the start. What was seen in front of Dhritarashtra was something that he had nurtured for years together. So to try being innocent to our own life's problems can never make things right. We would have been the cause somewhere. That is why the commentator says, Evam sarvatmana andhaha. People who have been blind externally have achieved a lot, says the Sanskrit commentator. But what was wrong with Dhritarashtra? He was blind from the within. Sarvatmana andhaha. What made him an andha? There is where the point lies. He knew at the start itself that this war is not going to yield the result that he wished and he wanted. Why? There is an instance in the Udyoga Parva, because Mahabharata is classified into 18 parvas, 18 chapters. A chapter is called by different names, Sargas, Adhyayas, Parva, Kandam, so on and so forth. So it has 18. Adi Parva, Sabha Parva, Vana Parva, Virata Parva, Udyoga Parva, Bhishma Parva, Drona Parva, Karna Parva, Shalya Parva. It goes on. Put together with an appendix portion called Harivamsha, we have roughly about 125,000 verses. It is 4.5 times the size of Iliad and Odyssey put together. 3.5 times the size of Paradise Lost and Paradise Gained. And till about 40 years in Kanchipuram, we had a Tatacharya who knew 125,000 shlokas by heart. So, in this compendium, in Udyoga Parva, after Krishna happened to be the messenger of the Pandavas, saying that you just have to give us 5 villages, that's enough. But that expedition was not successful. Krishna returned. That is when Dhritarashtra came up with a very unique, out of the box thinking. Where was the box is a question. So he still had out of the box. He thought, why don't we give something Krishna under the... It began then. I would oft quote one of the examples that my maternal grandfather used to state. My maternal grandfather, whom I was extremely attached to, served the State Bank of India for over 38 years. Serving one organization for such a long time was a badge of sincerity. Today it's a simple act of redundancy. You're out of sync. So, he joined a bank while it was called the Imperial Bank. So his grandmother, my maternal grandfather's grandmother, it's like a Woodworth Breakwater advertisement. So while she used to be suffering from good health, she used to be living in Kumbhakonam. So, yeah, suffering from good health because... So she used to live in Kumbhakonam. He went and told her that I've got a government job. And securing a government job was like salvation. So, and that was one of the prerequisites for marriage. So she congratulated the grandson and she said, now you run to Madhurantakam, which is in the outskirts of Chennai. Go have a darshan of Garuda there. Garuda is just one of the various little sanctum sanctorums in the temple. It's not the main devata. But the grandmother said, go. And he didn't have the courage to ask her back or answer her back. He came. He saw Garuda in Madhurantakam. Beautiful Garuda with a very sharp nose. Beautiful extended wings on either side with 4 hands. 2 above, 2 beneath. That is when he realized what his grandmother meant. He's going for a government job. So Dhritarashtra wanted to check if Krishna would also work that way. So he sent one of his confidants called Sanjaya and said, Sanjaya, you go and check in Dwaraka if Krishna razi hai kya. Jao, dekhe aao, batao. He spoke Hindi? Oh yes. He didn't want to print customized t-shirts, Hindi theriyadu poda. So he went to Dwaraka, and that day, it's a scene in Udyoga Parva. You can always fact check me like Rajdeep. I don't know who fact checks him. So, Sanjaya happened to go to Dwaraka. That morning, Krishna was host to his close friend Arjuna and Arjuna's wife Draupadi. Yatra Krishnauscha Krishnascha Satyabhama cha Bhamini Kumari chapi Panchali Vedi Madhya Samuthita Shubhaga Darshaniyangi Swastitaya chalochanaha Shyama Padmapala Sakshi Neelakunjita Murjata Murdhaja Tamratunganaki Subhru Charupina Payodhara, says Vyasa while describing her. She was a piece of beauty, immaculate beauty, absolutely dark-skinned, with eyes that were akin to the petals of a newly blossomed lotus, with a nose that akin to the sesame flower, with lips that looked as if the corals were taken from the ocean and crushed and made into a fine paste and applied to the lips up and beneath. And her teeth looked like as if the stars were for a mistake taken from the constellation and put into the jaws. She had such a conch-shaped neck. She had such a beautiful torso with a hip that was quite so less visible from a distance. People could understand and decipher that in human anatomy, you need to have a hip, else it was not visible at all. It was Sumadhyama. Madhyama is middle. Sumadhyama is where you should not be able to see the hip. The hip should be so thin that if the flower were attached with the stalk in the hair, unable to bear the weight of the stalk, the hip should break, it seems. Let's see, this is just theory. So, I will have to scout for real life examples. So, let's keep it simple. Now, she was that pretty. She was ferried to Dwaraka by her very valorous husband called Arjuna. And Arjuna and Krishna were seated in the large bed of the bedrooms of Dwaraka. It was a very smart city then. And Sanjaya goes that from that morning when people wanted to meet Krishna, Krishna had informed the receptionist that he is not available. Privacy, please do not disturb. And anybody who came, the answer was a no. Sanjaya was not cognizant of this order that was just struck in the morning. He came. He asked the receptionist, can I meet? She said, he's been denying all appointments. I can always check with him. And she checked. Came cho. Right, it's Dwaraka. And Krishna said, bhej do. Majama and then bhej do. And Sanjaya had to go. Before Sanjaya could enter the suite, what Krishna did is something very unique in the Bharata. He was reclining on the bed. He asked Arjuna to go at right angles to him, which means Arjuna has to be at right angles to Krishna, placing his head on Krishna's lap and extending his legs. Then he commanded Draupadi to keep Arjuna's one leg on her lap and Satyabhama, his wife, to keep Arjuna's other leg on her lap. Imagine the scene. Now he said, Rakshaka, the bodyguard there, Telugu bhashalo, Bantu ante bodyguard. Kada? Atikoskaram, Tyagaraja Swami, Kirtanam Rachanam Chestunnappudu, Bantu Riti Koluvu antaru. So he asked the bouncer outside, send him in. So enters Sanjaya. Sanjaya has come to impress upon Krishna and asked what mode, how to pay, all of that. He sees the scene. Krishna is sleeping. Arjuna is at right angles. One leg on Draupadi, one leg on Satyabhama. And Krishna asks, Sanjay, you have something to say? I would like, I'm all ears, tell me. And that's when Sanjaya said, I'm sorry, I just came just like that. Thank you so much. And he left. He goes back to Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra, being the very arduous well-wisher king of his sons alone, asked Sanjaya, oh, how was your journey? You sojourned to Dwaraka. How was it? Did you speak to Krishna? How was the deed? Sanjaya says, I saw. What did you see? I saw the dead bodies of your 100 sons on the bed. Yatra Krishnauscha Krishnascha Satyabhamacha Bhamini. Dhritarashtra asked why. The comfort with which Arjuna and Krishna were speaking, no fool on this earth would even have the courage to ask, what should I pay you to be on my side? Krishna wanted to convey this to him. You cannot buy me. I am here. The way the chemistry works between the two suggested Dhritarashtra, come what may, you will see your sons die. That is why, for the first verse of the Gita, the commentator says, Nyatva api. Despite being told by the same Sanjaya a week back that I see the 100 sons lying on the bed, this man again asked, which means when you know something for certain, do not ask for that again. That's another lesson. Now, the question was very simple by Arjuna. Sishyastheham shadhimam tvam prapannam yachreyastan nishchitam bruhitam me sishyastheham shadhimam tvam prapannam. Treat me as your student. I know we are cousins. I know we are related in more than one way. But treat me as your student. Where? On the battlefield. He chose the wrong place. Treat me as your student and you tell me what should be done. Shishyastheham shadhimam tvam prapanam. Tell me. At that point in time, Krishna has to answer. What was his question? Arjuna made some valid points. He said, people who are standing in front of me are extremely related to me. He gave a typical, the Tamil statement, Unnudambil vodum rattamum yengudambil vodum rattamum ondrallava. The tone of your voice should change if you have to. With the voice that I have, I will not garner even 2 votes. So your voice should change, and probably you should slur in a few Tamil pronunciation places. Make obvious Tamil words seem false, and then you can get more votes. So he said, Krishna said, did you realize that you all shared the same blood group today? Didn't you know that you were all related? Those days you made all long speeches, rigmaroles that I will fight them. And on the battlefield you realize that you're all your relatives. So Krishna should have just said, fight. Fight. Else I will. Simple. Question was simple. Should I fight them or not? Krishna explained Atma, Shariram, Karma Yogam, Jnana Yogam, Bhakti Yogam, 700 verses. Arjuna for a moment forgot what he asked. நம்ம என்ன கேட்டோம், இவர் என்ன சொல்றார்? And he said towards the end, Krishna, stop, I will fight. Bas karo. Why? Because the commentator says that Krishna wanted to use Arjuna as an excuse to speak. He wanted to speak. He was waiting for the opportunity. He had none. He just chose the opportunity. Come what may, be the battlefield, even if people are just waiting to fight and kill and slay each other, I am ready to give those 700 verses. So the highest form of philosophy, which is regarded as the quintessence of the esoteric verses of the Upanishads called Bhagavad Gita, came from a battlefield. What a beauty. Now he says 3 things. Karma Yogam, then comes Jnana Yogam. So Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga he covers between chapter 1 and 6. It is called Prathama Shatkam. The first set of 6 chapters covers 2 yogas, Karma and Jnana. Chapter 7 to chapter 12 is Bhakti Yoga, which is called Madhyama Shatkam or Dvitiya Shatkam. So he has covered Karma and Jnana in first 6 chapters, dedicates the next 6 to Bhakti Yoga. Karma, Jnana, Bhakti, over. It should have ended with chapter 12. Then why is it chapter 13 to 18? Because he said if you have doubts in the first 12 chapters, ask now. So the last set of 6 chapters is a beautiful Q&A session. It doesn't have to do with one yoga. Whatever doubts you have, you ask. What is the moral? That this civilization has always been very open to questioning. You are not penalized for questioning. You are celebrated. Every scripture that we revere is in fact a conversation between 2 people. Yudhishthira and Bhishma speak, Vishnu Sahasranama. Krishna and Arjuna speak, Bhagavad Gita. Yaksha and Yudhishthira speak, Yaksha Prashnam. Valmiki and Narada speak, Ramayanam. Shuka Maharishi and Parikshit speak, Bhagavatam. Maitreya and Parashara speak, Vishnu Puranam. 2 people speak, it's a conversation. You have the right to ask. But what is less appreciated is the intent with which you ask. You don't ask to put the other person down. You don't ask to corner the person. That's not the intent. If your intent is genuinely to know this is one civilization, Bharadiyar, who lived a few kilometers away in Triplicane, Tiruvallikeni, Alvar says, Meenamar Puigai, Nanmalar Puivan, Vetkai Node, Sennarindu, Kalamar Veyam, Kayed, Alara, Kara, Adan Kaline, Kadiva, Ana in Tuyaram Tira, Pul, Wurnd, Sendre, Nindr, Ari, Totane, Ten, Amar Solai, Madama, Maile, Tiruvallikeni, Kandene. This is a 6th century verse that celebrates the flora and the fauna and the religiosity that was smeared in this beautiful little hamlet called Tiruvallikeni. So Bharatiyar lived there. There's a very famous line. He says, Yamarinda Murigalile Tamil Mori pol inidagum engum kanu. People say, right, Tamil Mori sirandar. I went and asked him, what other languages you know? He knows only Tamil. That is why Bharatiyar makes a very simple and a very honest disclaimer. He says, Yamarinda Morigalile. In the list of languages that I know, Tamil is very beautiful. See, that is called intellectual honesty. So that is why I said, in the little knowledge that I have garnered, harnessed and nourished, I can say that this civilization has always been open to questions, and chapter 13 to 18 is an exemplification of the fact that the civilization has allowed you to question. That's another lesson. Now, karma, jnana, bhakti, 3 things. He has told it elaborately. How do we summarize? It's a kind of, I don't know if it's a fashion to say this, or it is probably deemed very mature if people say this. People, a lot of them, when I give lectures in India, outside, they have one thing to say. They say that, okay, my grandparents used to recite Vishnu Sahasranamam, fine, I have great attachment for it. But if I wish to recite, I don't know what it says. I don't know what it means. So I'm not going to recite. Is that fine? See, I have a very simple answer. I don't decide what is fine for you or not. But if you want an answer to this question, that isn't the right way to approach. I agree that we are deficient in understanding the language in which that work is delivered. Yes, our knowledge in the language, in this case Sanskritam, is very low. Agree. But that doesn't make it a qualification to not recite. If that be the case, only if you know, only if you understand, only if you realize, only if you internalize, you will have to recite, then you can never give vaccines to children. Do you explain to the child, oh, this is a vial? This is an attenuated vaccine. Here is a syringe. And when that is going into your body, your immune system, do you say all this to a child? You just inject, and hopefully that this child will carry some legacy. You believe that when the child is 18 or 19 years of age, in case the child is going to study recombinant DNA technology as one of the electives, the child will learn how a vaccine is made. So knowledge comes later. Action comes first. So karma yoga is first, followed by jnana yoga. You do the karma, then knowledge will follow. Don't expect the knowledge to hit you, because you will never be able to do the karma then. So karma is explained first, followed by jnana. I remember a typical verse, line that my grandmother used to state. Don't take it otherwise, it's a very typical Tamil statement. While I used to study, she used to say, Kadan ezhaveen padikade. Kedu pettirukala indha vari? Padlena patrugo. So, do not read anything just for the sake of reading. Then that knowledge that you incur from that karma will not last. Because I remember 6th standard, at least till I wrote, we had less than 1,000 words we had to write. So 1857 Battle of Plassey, 1857 Battle of Plassey, Battle of Plassey. So by heart, and you have to write that examination hall used to be such a ruckus, because the first person to ask the additional sheet used to be, ma'am, additional sheet. That means that person is very intelligent. Because some of them will be hopeless and clueless what to write. What is that man writing? And then finally you end up doing the Hindu ritual. Let's go the A.R. Rahman. Mama Jeevana. Then you tie all the sheets together, hoping that there's something meaningful in the paper. So the beauty is, when there is karma, there is jnana. But the jnana should mature itself into love. That is bhakti. When any action performed with, coupled with, intertwined with the knowledge why the action is performed, and then laced with a layer of love for that action, makes that action successful. So doing the action, karma yoga. Interspersed with the knowledge of why that action, jnana yoga. Laced with the love and the dedication and the internalization for the karma makes it bhakti yoga. But Krishna doesn't stop here. He says do all of this, but do it with the intent that you are not doing. That is even tougher. Who spoke? I spoke. I never say Bhagavan gave me the opportunity through the Rotary Club of Madrasis to walk with the body whose legs is the blessing of him, up the stairs whose material comes from his own body, and then walk into a hall with various jivatmas housed in the material bodies. We don't say that way. Who spoke? I spoke. So how do we dedicate it to? That's when he says, use the hands of how you would take the fruits of the jackfruit out. When we cut open the jackfruit, there's a traditional art of applying and greasing your hands with oil. You take everything of it and you eat, but nothing sticks to your hands because you have applied oil. So that oil, Krishna says, is dedicating the action to him. Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Ma there means don't. Don't take it to yourself. Karmanyeva adhikaraste. You are entitled only to do that karma. Now Arjuna asks in return, suppose I dedicate to you and then do the karma, what is the advantage? Krishna says that the karma's acts will not be attached to you. For example, for a variety of things, each of the towns that we have been blessed in this land of Tamil Nadu is home to. One such beautiful town in the southern part of Tamil Nadu is Tirunelveli. It has beautiful temples that we have received from the Vijayanagaras, the Pandyas and the Nayaka architecture there. Besides the temples, Tirunelveli is famous for something called the halwa. And in Tamil, you can use the verb sanya padam in two ways. You can consume and give. Halwa saapdala, halwa kudukala. Yeah. And the Tirunelveli halwa has something very unique that even Krishna takes some while to give, which is moksham. You don't add ghee to the halwa. You add halwa to the ghee. So there is a barrel of ghee that's obtained from A2 organic grass-fed milk. And then you put that all together, and when that floats, the ghee floats, you see Vaikuntha. Because from then on, it's not the highway, it's the bypass. So, this halwa is a terrible and an amazing combination. It has sugar. It has ghee. What a combination. Now, I go to a house the person has invited me, which people rarely do. So let's assume there is one Homo sapien who's invited me, this primitive mortal. I go to their house, and they still follow some ancient ways that you feed someone who comes home. So, and that day happens to be, they're quite interested in my departure, so they serve me Tirunelveli halwa. And they serve that on a plate. And I'm quite elated to see the halwa being present to me. So I consume that halwa. As I consume, like Mamdani, I use my hands. So I use the halwa and start eating. I start just hogging on it. And the pace at which I hog on the halwa, some of it goes into my mouth, the rest of it is smeared on me. My hands and legs are coated with halwa. I glisten all the way. So the lady of the house, who's been extremely hospitable and courteous, comes to me and says, "Are you done?" I said, "Yes." She gives me some hand wash. So I apply that on my feet where it's glistening, some on my hands, and then I clean myself. I'm done. She gives me more hand wash. And I say, "What for?" She says, "For your tongue." I said, "Why?" See, what made me wash is the sugary and the greasy nature of the halwa, which is stuck to me. But what experienced the halwa was only my tongue. None of my body parts experienced the halwa but the tongue. What experienced and enjoyed the halwa never had the greasy nature stuck to it. What didn't enjoy the halwa had the greasy nature over it. So, a Jivatma in the body should dedicate the acts to Paramatma like the tongue. Then the effect of the object which it relishes will not attach itself to the Atma. Like how the halwa doesn't attach itself to the tongue. So as Krishna explains this, Arjuna says, "Finally, what should I do?" Right, towards आपने बहुत बात किया, अच्छा लगा, अंत में थोड़ा बताइए कि क्या करना है, मॉरल क्या है, बता दीजिए काना. So that is when he says, "Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja." If at all a large section of the Indian masses know a couple of verses of the Gita, we should remember there's one man called B.R. Chopra. When only one television existed in the entire house with 20 people, today even the fetus asks for a separate television. So there used to be one television, and then there used to be a chakra. मैं काल अथ श्री महाभारत कथा आहा महाभारत कथा कथा है पुरुषार्थ की है स्वार्थ की. You remember? So there is this verse, 18th chapter, 66th verse. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarva papebhyo moksha ishyami ma shuchaha. Do not worry. Krishna says ma shuchaha, do not worry. So if he says Arjuna, do not worry, that means the pre-qualification to learn this verses we have to worry. Oh, terkita kavala pada dingo na? Na kavala pada liye. Kavala pada da terkita bhai kavala pada dingo na kya pata hai. Arjuna was worried. So he says ma shuchaha, don't worry. Then he says sarva dharman parityajya. Whatever I've told you till now, forget for a minute. That is even more horrible. You teach everything and then you say ipna jonnadella marandurukom. Then he says surrender to me. If you feel that this karma jnana bhakti samuchayam is so tough, surrender to me. Why didn't he say that first? Because only when you say the toughest of the things, you realize the value of something that is as easy and accessible as this. I'm sure, have you heard of Seva, which you all do in Rotary? You all do Seva, right? But there is a delicacy called Sevai. கேட்டுக்கல சேவையும் பண்ணலாம் நீங்க சேவையும் பண்றேன் சேவையும் பண்ணலாம். You know what is the traditional way? Some people are just mad after seva. You will have to take the rice, then ground it well, and then make it into a paste, steam it, then put it into a tripod stand, and then rotate it from the up, and then you will see beautiful Adisesha-like structures coming beneath. And then you take that, dry it, and then probably use a lot of things to make it colorful and tasty. So you can describe this like how most of these online chefs do for about 10 minutes. And the person who listens will be so aghast because it's such a long process. And then towards the end, oh, this is very good, but you know the West, there's a very good word to address if something is not so doable. Interesting. Interesting means I'm just not going to do it. So, you say, oh, this is interesting, but is there another way to do? Yeah, there is. Go to the market next and buy Concord Sevai. But you wouldn't realize the value of the ready-made Sevai if I hadn't told you what the 10 minutes was. So chapter 1 to 18, he dedicates to Karma, Jnana, Bhakti, and towards the end he says, surrender to me. So life is about understanding one's strengths and weakness. And finally realizing, there's no necessity. It's not somebody who sits on your head and is coaxing you to do it. Rather, it is very prudent to assume that we realize that there is something above me which guides me and is monitoring me. There is something which is under my control. Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits calls it the circle of one's own influence. Something which is beyond is what he calls it the circle of concern, which is beyond me. What is obvious is what I do. What is beyond the obvious is where I surrender. So Krishna talks about Sharanagati as one moral in the 18th chapter. So Bhagavad Gita, which is a conversation between two people, simply to obtain the permission to fight in a war, becomes a beautiful compendium for us to decide what we should work and how we should work. So Bhagavad Gita can be interpreted to management, can be interpreted, so it's absolutely malleable and ductile that way, which makes it so consumable for all ages across the society. Yes, it does come from the Hindu point of view because there are certain understandings, that certain basic assumptions that we have to agree, that we keep our birth cycle process cyclic. That is very important to understand the Gita. Yes, it does have certain Hindu leanings there, because if you don't believe in the concept of rebirth, then a lot of what he says will not be applicable. It's assumed that you are understanding, you are agreeing to the fact that life and birth, punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jathare shayanam, iha samsare, bahudustare, kripaya pare, pahi murare, you will have to agree to the concept of rebirth, then agree to the point of papa and punya, and then if you read the Gita, it is applicable to a large society. It can be read by anyone, even Trump. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So, this Bhagavad Gita has a variety of learnings because we spend in a traditional format when we learn. It's called Kalakshepam. Where in the traditional way we learn this esoteric work with its commentary, with its sub-commentaries, with the purport, with what is underlying as a meaning from a revered guru. I learned Gita Bhashya from the erstwhile principal of the Madras Sanskrit College called Srivatsankacharya Swami 15 years back. It's roughly about a 2.5 year study. But it is a bit challenging to bring the essence of the Gita in the traditional way in an hour's lecture. So whatever I've said, do not assume this is a full stop. It should just probably be an appetizer to learn the work more. What I have said is not an end to it. It's just the capital letter of the sentence. So there's a long way to go. As the poet says, and miles to go before I sleep. Let's make it Indic, and kilometers before I sleep. So there's a long way in the Gita. But you can safely assume that this work has been so much loved and respected that in the last 2,100 years, because around Bhasas, in the last 2,100 years, just in Sanskritam alone, leave the other bhashas, just in Sanskritam, we have 127 commentaries to this work. 127 Sanskrit commentaries to the Sanskrit work. To the same Sanskrit work, we have other commentaries, like we have a Tamil commentary, Telugu, Kannada, Konkani, Tulu, Malayalam, Odia, Bengali. Name a language. Forget the translations. Translation is just an art. AI will do it better for us. If you're perplexed, ask perplexity. So they will do. But it's a work that has been enjoyed for such a long time, which says that something in it keeps it afloat through ages. I remember the days when I used to just wait for hours together outside the British Library in Bangalore, in NG Road, to get the first copy of Harry Potter. From the Sorcerer's Stone, to the Chamber of Secrets, to the Azkaban, to the Goblet of Fire, to the Hallows. I used to wait. And I used to feel, from the words of Harry the Potter, I would feel Harry Potter was the ultimate. I believed thinking and meditating on Harry will give me salvation. It's such a beautiful work. I believe that it's a beautiful read of Rowling. But 50 years later, when a couple of us may manage to survive, I don't know how many of them will be reading Harry Potter. But even then, people will be reading the Bhagavad Gita. Because a work's height is tested with the way it sees the sagacity of time. And Gita does that. So, I'm sure the Rotarians of this club have had the good thought of projecting a work like this in a very succinct fashion in the time given on a weekday. And rarely you bring memories of the hometown of your guest speaker to him. Today you brought memories of my hometown. I live in Bangalore. We couldn't enter the hotel because there was traffic. So I'm so thankful that you brought my city to your city. So it takes a lot of hospitality from the host's side to ensure that you keep my memories so alive and cherishable. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm so happy that while we are struggling to bring some fire atop the hill, we at least had some fire here. Thank you.
Namaskaram. In the coming months of January and February, there are very many discourses of mine, both in Tamil and in English, across different cities. The details of them have been posted on all my social media handles. Nevertheless, once more, for your attention and for your sake, I would like to read out very quickly. And on the 30th of December, tentatively I am to speak on the importance of Nutiyattu Divyadesham on the Vaikuntha Ekadashi Eve for PGP Auditorium in Singapore. On the 31st of December, it is for Tamil Isai Mandram in Georgetown. I will be speaking on Tiruppugadil Ramayanam. Coming to the month of January, on the 17th of Jan, I will be speaking on Narayaniyam in Wonder for Shanmukhananda in Mumbai. On the 18th of December, it is our grand production called Agre Pashyami at the very same premises. 1st of February, I am to participate and speak at the Jain University Summit in Kochi. And 13th of February, it will be a special lecture for Shivaratri for Odakattur Mutt, which will be organized by Ramakrishna Bhajana Sabha. On the 22nd of February, for the first time, I am going to be a part of Mayuram Bhajanotsavam in the very, very famous and very close to heart Mayavaram. So that is the program for now. I know it's too many programs. All this has been put in the form of poster. Please do participate wherever you can. Namaskar.